So I'm Professor Brian Davies from London, UK. I'm Emeritus Professor in Medical Robotics at Imperial College in London, and I work on surgical robots nowadays fairly exclusively. So there are various types of robots which are good for surgical implementation. Some of them are very simple and others extremely complex. So that's an area that I work with the people from Mechatronics in Medicine group who are part of the mechanical engineering department in South Kensington. So that has a lot of very talented postdoc people, researchers, as well as people undertaking a PhD in medical robotics. I think technology is such, we're beginning to see a little bit more what it is that affects health in general. A lot of it is concerned with prevention rather than rectification after the event. So we want to prevent disease, and that is going to be the most cost-effective route. So that implies a lot of checking with MRI and CT and various blood tests to try and ensure that we can target disease very early on, catch it sufficiently early that we can treat it effectively. Now that means that there's a lot of checking which has to be done, and that implies that we have a lot of devices to do that checking and people who can then analyze the results. So that's going to be quite a costly shift in requirements for the medical profession. Now, the technology itself, I think, is growing towards, well, there are two ways in which it's developed over time. One is that the robots themselves have become larger, implemented by very large companies, and associated with that are a whole range of planning systems, simulation, and checking the workflow so that you know exactly what it is that you're about to do, and then devices which will ensure the implementation of that planning and intended treatment. Contrary to those large companies with large robots, there are also trends towards simple devices which are lower cost, fairly specific to treatment of the disease, and really they are smart devices, if you might say. Some of them are robots, others are just highly sophisticated sensing systems which have sense of touch or associated with artificial intelligence and things of that nature as part of the diagnostic and treatment procedures. I started way back in 1988 with a study in the laboratory. There's somebody called Mr. John Wickham, who was a urologist, came to see me knowing I'd done industrial robotics. And he said, I'm sure you could implement a robot for surgery. And he was looking for prostate surgery, benign hyperplasia of the blocking of the urethra. And so I tried this out on a clinical study eventually, but starting with a robot in the laboratory, realized that that was so complex we needed to have a system that was safe. And at that stage, nobody had done this before, so how safe should it be? We had to make our way in the dark. So I implemented this 3 years later in clinical trials with John Wickham, who started the Society for Minimally Invasive Therapy, which was a very innovative group of surgeons. And we had very good results from that. You could see the surgery itself was very consistent, very precise. But at the end of the day, we didn't manage to sell this to any large company because it was far too early. You don't want to be the first in the system. But it was the very first patient-specific device for surgery in the world. Moving on, of course, we've seen the gradual growth of these things. I've worked in neurosurgery, in a whole range of abdominal surgeries. I've also developed a company called the Acrobot Company, which developed unicondylar knee surgery, and now I have a small spin-off company called the Signature Robot Limited for a very small, low-cost robot, which will be good for working on small joints like hands and feet, ankles and knees. So we have big hopes and expectations for the future. It has developed over the years and become this huge multinational industry, which was not anticipated back in the early days. Well, I would see simpler devices myself, which are implemented by people for very specific tasks. As I say, I'm developing something for small joints, could do the unicondylar knee, the patellofemoral as well, but mostly things like fingers and toes and ankles, elbows, hands. In joint replacement, some joints, particularly the minimally invasive and more demanding joints, unicondylar knee, for example, in the hands of somebody who's highly skilled, with a lot of training, you can get extremely good results. But it is usually quite difficult to get that quality of result. So what we need is really things like robots and navigation systems to give us the degree of precision that is needed, so that we've got structured workflows, so you know exactly what it is you have to do. You don't jump and miss out planning stages, for example. You have a precise idea of what it is you want to do, and then hopefully if you're using a robot, it will come along and precisely implement your plan. You have the opportunity during the operation to change that plan. Those devices will give us the assured technology that will give the best result for the patient. At the end of the day, there are lots of other reasons why joints fail. People develop disease, they die of a heart attack, whatever. You can't do the surgery for stroke, for example. These things happen. It's part of life.